Every night, Eleanor Brooks' hand hovered over the phone like it was the only anchor tethering her to a world she had long since measured in rhythms of expectation and memory. The clock in her modest living room ticked relentlessly toward 9:17 p.m., and with each second, her heartbeat synchronized, a metronome of hope learned over 27 years of waiting. The silence around her was both unbearable and oddly comforting. It had become a companion, a silent witness to the small constellations of her life that had drifted past unnoticed. Each ring that never came felt like a quiet betrayal, a reminder that promises often linger far longer than they were intended to. That human intention cannot always defy circumstance, and that hope, stubborn and unwavering, could sustain a person in the deepest, loneliest corners of existence. In that silence, Eleanor felt both fragile and invincible. Tethered to a memory of love that had never quite vanished and a future she could not yet grasp, Eleanor had lived in the same small Midwestern town for decades. A place where winters stretched endlessly, where snow would bury the streets in brilliant, suffocating whiteness for months at a time, and where life moved at a rhythm dictated not by hours or minutes, but by the subtle shifts of light as it fell through bare branches in the early morning and late afternoon. She was 53 now, but her body carried more than the evidence of years. It carried work-worn hands that had cooked meals, typed letters, soothed aches, and carried burdens both ordinary and profound. Her hair, prematurely silvered, framed a face lined with quiet resilience and tempered sorrow, and yet in her eyes there was a spark that refused to fade. A flicker of longing and memory that had shaped every decision she had ever made, every path she had walked, and every Sunday she had waited for a voice she could no longer hold in her arms. It was 26 years ago when the calls stopped. Eleanor was 26, living in a narrow brick apartment above a small bakery in Dayton, Ohio. A place where the smell of fresh bread drifted upward through the floorboards every morning, mingling with the faint static of her old radio and the soft hum of city life beyond her windows. The apartment was modest, hardly more than a kitchenette, a small worn couch, and a single bedroom, but it was hers. It was here, amidst the quiet hum of ordinary existence, that she met Thomas Reed, a junior associate at the law firm where she worked as a receptionist. He had been new to the city, nervous, with a perfectly pressed suit that seemed almost a shield against his jitters, hands that fidgeted constantly, and a voice that carried an unexpected calmness. Eleanor had noticed that first, the way his words fell deliberately, as though each syllable required careful landing. And then there was the sound of his laughter, low and unhurried, that seemed to make the small office feel a little lighter, a little warmer, even if only for a moment. Their connection did not explode in brilliance, nor was it immediate. It did not announce itself with grand declarations or fireworks. Instead, it unfolded quietly, like a river carving its patient path through stone. Shared lunches in the tiny firm breakroom, late night phone calls that stretched into hours, whispers of dreams and small confessions, secrets not yet ready for the world. Thomas dreamed of New York, of big cases, of ambition that stretched far beyond the confines of small-town life. Eleanor's dreams were quieter. She did not crave the bright lights or constant motion of a city that never slept. She wanted stability, a home with a kitchen table scarred by daily life, a place where love was measured in presence, in small gestures, in the consistency of everyday moments. When Thomas received an offer from a prestigious Manhattan firm, it seemed inevitable that he would leave, and yet there was a promise. "It's temporary," he said one evening, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, the warmth of his touch lingering. "A year, maybe two. I'll call every Sunday. Same time, 9:17 p.m. And for a while he did. Those calls became sacred rituals. Every Sunday, Eleanor would sit cross-legged on her worn couch, anticipation coiling in her chest like a living thing, breathing in a rhythm shaped entirely by possibility. They spoke of everything from the mundane to the profound, the grueling hours he spent in courtrooms and offices, the victories and small triumphs in her life, the vastness of a city that thrilled and intimidated him in equal measure. Eleanor listened, laughed, sometimes cried quietly into her hands. Each conversation was proof, tangible proof, that Thomas existed somewhere, and that she still mattered, still counted, beyond the walls of her quiet, unremarkable apartment. Each Sunday was a tether, a lifeline connecting her to a world that could have been empty without him. And then the calls began to change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the long, lingering conversations shrank. The words became clipped, hurried. There was no laughter, no warmth, only hurried exchanges, reminders that life moved relentlessly, and that distance was an ever-looming force. Then, one Sunday, the call never came. Silence stretched its heavy fingers across the room. Eleanor waited. 1 hour. 2. The night crawled past in slow, agonizing increments, as she imagined every possible excuse. Perhaps a flight was delayed. Perhaps a meeting had gone late. Perhaps something had gone terribly wrong. Days bled into weeks, then months, and yet Eleanor did not stop waiting. She moved from the apartment above the bakery to a small, pale, blue, shuttered house where the phone rested on a wooden table in the living room, always within reach, a constant sentinel of hope. She never married. Friends drifted away. Her parents passed. Technology advanced, the old corded phone replaced first by cordless, then digital, yet she never changed her number. Some promises, she believed, were anchored not in people, but in systems. Every Sunday, she checked the clock. Every year on her birthday, she imagined the call, rehearsed what she would say. Sometimes simply listening to the silence, letting it speak in ways that the noisy world could not. Deep down, Eleanor did not yet realize that the waiting had become less about Thomas, and more about the young woman she had once been, the Eleanor full of dreams, warmth, and unscarred by anticipation, loss, and isolation. She waited not only for his voice, but for a life paused in midair, a life that might have unfolded differently had the world given her a chance. The 27th year arrived quietly, unremarkable except for the weight of its significance. Eleanor, now 53, silver-haired and marked by time, faced a particularly cruel winter. Snow had sealed the town in white silence. Streets empty and frozen. One Sunday night, the power went out. No lights, no heat, no softly glowing clock on the stove. Wrapped in a blanket she stared at the phone, a relic, powerless, mute. For the first time in 27 years, she missed 9017. Something inside her cracked, not with shouting, not with rage, but with the slow, relentless ache of decades of waiting, of living in quiet anticipation. The next morning, desperate for answers, she drove to the phone company, hoping for any explanation, an outage, a line problem, anything. And then she overheard it. Behind the counter, in a casual conversation, floated a name she had not dared speak aloud in decades: Thomas Reed. Her heart reacted before her mind could process. Questions poured from her like water from a dam, unplanned, urgent, desperate. And then the truth, hard, inevitable, cruel, emerged. Thomas Reed had died 26 years ago in a car accident outside Philadelphia. The calls had not stopped because he chose silence. They had stopped because he had no chance to explain, no opportunity to reach her. The air felt too thin. The room felt impossibly small. Eleanor returned home and sank into her chair, staring at the phone as if it were now accusing her. 27 years of life, suspended, paused, invested in hope for a call that could never come. She cried, not for him, but for herself, for the lost years, for the life lived in the shadow of absence, for the youth and love and possibilities she had put on hold. Grief arrived not as an explosion, but as a slow tide, washing over her, reshaping the edges of her world. Among her possessions, she discovered letters Thomas had written in the early days of their love. One line stopped her cold. If anything ever happens, don't wait for me. Live loudly, she had done the opposite. Slowly, deliberately, Eleanor began to rebuild. She joined a local community center, volunteering to help seniors learn how to use smartphones. Ironically, she found herself teaching others to make the calls they were afraid to place, to reach out and risk hurt, to break their own silence. In their stories, their regrets, and their laughter, she rediscovered a truth she had long forgotten: waiting is also a choice. One afternoon, she met Claire, a young woman newly divorced, trembling with fear at the prospect of beginning again. Eleanor said nothing long at first. Then, quietly, with the weight of experience behind her voice, she said, "Don't postpone your life for something that doesn't have a return date." The words surprised even her, carrying the quiet authority of lived experience. She painted her living room a bold yellow, unapologetic and warm, and replaced the old phone with a new one, a tool rather than a relic. For the first time in decades, her future was not measured by the sound of a single call. Spring arrived, carrying birdsong and the laughter of children down the street. Eleanor sat on her porch, watching the sky transform from amber to rose, feeling the weight of 27 years lift slightly from her shoulders. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Nothing important, yet she smiled. Understanding that the call she had waited for had never been meant for Thomas. It had always been meant for her. A reminder that life moves relentlessly, that grief and hope are intertwined, and that silence can sometimes teach what sound never can. Eleanor stood, stretched, and stepped inside her home, not to wait but to live. 27 years of waiting had ended, not with the sound of a ringing phone, but with the steady beat of her own heart, strong and unbroken. In that moment, the silence felt complete, full, and entirely her own.